What's up, everyone? Kevin from Epic Gardening here, and actually I have my UK counterpart, Kevin Fortey of Giant Veg, on the podcast today. I've been excited about having Kevin on for a long time because I've been obsessed with giant vegetables for quite some time, and it really seems like people in the UK are experts at growing them, and so I figured why not have the expert on the podcast. So today we're going to talk about the history of giant vegetables, and it's a pretty interesting history, and Kevin Fortey is pretty well connected to it. So Kevin, thanks for coming on, and do you mind giving us a little bit of background on how Giant Veg kind of got its start?
Yes, it's good to meet a fellow Kevin, and hopefully you're going to get the bug as well.
Yep.
Yeah, my dad started off UK giant vegetable growing in the very early 1980s in a local traditional British pub. It was over a chat, really, amongst fellow pub goers, and they challenged one another to see who could grow the biggest pumpkin. And that lasted for about 2 years in that particular pub, because the pumpkins were getting that big that they couldn't get through the single pub door, so they had to have them outside at that time. And as usual, the British weather is pretty inclement, so they had to find a venue with double doors. And from there, they went to Cumbrian Workingmen's Club, which is a traditional workingmen's venue in Wales. And from there, it basically mothballed then into something which has become a worldwide phenomenon, really. And my dad started off all the art of growing giant vegetables in terms of seed saving, and we'll talk to you again about how he developed seed saving techniques. And then from there, the UK Giant Vegetable Championships went all over the UK, and it now has ended up in Malvern, which is held every September, and it's really is a spectacle.
Yeah. So when you say your dad started it in the UK, did he not only start it in the UK, but also sort of started the phenomenon worldwide? Like before 1980, was there a really big giant veg scene?
No, there wasn't really. My dad started off in the embryonic stages, and from there it basically mothballed. My dad sadly passed on in 96, but myself and my brother then took giant vegetable growing on to the next level in terms of social media. So I got quite an interesting story, actually, because I was thinking, how am I going to do a website? And there was this guy, Ashi Moko, and he sent me an email saying, send us some seeds and I'll develop you a website. So it was a pretty good deal, actually, because I sent Ash a load of seeds and he developed our giantveg.co.uk website, and we've not looked back since, really. And it's basically been the platform, really, to engage with people all over the world, including yourself.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful trade, giant vegetable seeds for a website. So yeah, I think I found you, I think it was Instagram for me, which is mostly it seems like how I'm finding most of my gardening friends these days is on Instagram. It seems like the plant community there is really friendly. So like when you were growing up, I guess your dad imparted most of that wisdom onto you, and then you've since developed techniques much further, right?
Yeah. So my dad started off some of the early pioneering techniques of seed saving and growing giant vegetables. And in the UK, we have allotments, which is basically like communal gardens. Mm-hmm. And my dad used to give myself and my brother a patch, really, just so we could compete against him. And I think what he was doing deep down was just giving us the giant veg bug, and we certainly have that.
This is a smart way to do it, right? Just pretend like it's a competition while he's teaching you everything.
Yeah, we've grown bigger and better than he ever did, and that was ever imaginable, to be honest. So it's all credit to him, really, and what he's done for us as a family. So.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I wish I had that type of experience growing up. I didn't grow up really around plants at all, and I came to it later in life. So we've done a little bit of the history. Where are we at now in, I guess, the world of giant veg? I understand you have a couple of Guinness Book of World Records, right? And then you've developed some techniques. Like, what's the scene look like right now?
Yeah, so we've got 2 former world records now. We don't have a current world record because the world's heaviest chili was beaten last year. So in terms of the giant vegetable scene now, where we are, we've done a number of TV programs. We've We've met Snoop Dogg, the world famous rapper. He came over to Wales to meet ourselves in the Inn Neil. And
Oh, wow.
that was a spectacle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, from there, we've done a number of TV programs, really just trying to promote giant vegetable growing throughout the world. We've done a program with BBC, a 3-part series on Countryfile talking about hydroponic growing, and soil, with a guy called Paul Martin, who, is a celebrity in himself. Also we've looked at trying really just to grow our social media platforms in terms of Instagram, and thanks to you, Kevin, we've picked up about 600 new followers over the last 2 days. So
Oh, no way.
my phone hasn't stopped beeping. So
Oh, no way. Yeah, you're going to have to start turning notifications off. That's something I learned a long time ago.
Yeah. So in terms of media exposure, we've been over to the States. I've done 2 talks, at one in California, in 2016, and then last year. So in terms of worldwide travel, we've been over to California. We spoke at the Rare Seeds Expo
Cool.
in Santa Rosa, and that was an absolute spectacle, really. Seeing the mountain and Tower of Gourds, and we wouldn't get away with that in the UK because health and safety would be all over it. So.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
but they all survived.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Yeah, that's one thing I'm embarrassed that I haven't been up to yet is the Rare Seed Expo. I need to go this year. Before we close out today's episode, I'm just curious, I know what it is for me, and I haven't even really done that much of giant veg growing, but what is it for you that keeps you so hooked on growing veg to this level, to this, I guess you could say, epic proportion?
Yeah, I think for us, growing giant vegetables, we're really passionate about it, and I'm sharing the love really and the passion for growing giant veg. And at the start of the season, what we aspire to do is to grow bigger and better vegetables, develop new genetics, and really just compete with science and try to grow the world's biggest vegetables, essentially. And that's what we all aspire to do, really. Either that be a personal best, winning at your local competition or your national competition. And then also trying to get more promotion in giant vegetables, so more schools development. And I've done a number of projects with local schools, and that's been fascinating, really. Just taking a giant cucumber in there and 5 children holding it up. It's a spectacle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've always thought, there's always new and unique ways to try to get kids into gardening, right? And what better way than walking in maybe with like a wheelbarrow full of gigantic cucumbers or peppers or what have you.
Yeah, the kids are fascinated by it. And one of the giant cabbages was used in a school for so one of the giant cabbages was used in a school for a maths lesson, science lesson, a cookery lesson. And there's much more to just growing vegetables in the ground. It's more, for me, it's more educating and trying to develop the next generation of future gardeners, really.
Right, exactly. And that's so for us here in America, one of the things most of us would probably remember, at least if you're my age, is we grew a little bean plant, just a very small bean. Basically, you just germinated the bean in it was in that sort of chalky, like green floral material, which so not even a hydroponic medium, no nutrients in it whatsoever. And you kind of just grew that and saw it germinate, and that was it. Which obviously I still remember it, so it made an impact, but certainly not as much as someone wheeling in, a giant squash and we all eat spaghetti with it or something like that,
Yeah. Well, years ago they used to carry them in blankets, but now you have to have a crane. So
that's incredible. Yeah.
Come on.
How do you prepare your ground? How do you prepare your environment? And then what to do over the wintertime and early spring to actually get your garden ready to grow giant veg? So this actually, Kevin, is something I'm, of course, not that familiar with. I don't have a true winter here in San Diego, and also I haven't really grown a lot of giant veg. So where do I start if I'm a beginner? What do I need to be thinking about when I'm in the winter or when I'm just trying to do some prep?
You're fortunate to have sunshine all year round, but we have 4 or 5 seasons probably in a month in the UK.
Yeah.
In terms of winter for us, and probably for you, it's an opportunity for us to look at cleaning down our tools, tidying up the greenhouses or the glass houses, and really just having a general winter maintenance. But probably for you, it's more about successional growing. So you're looking at what you can plant in the ground afterwards. After a crop has been harvested. But for us, what we look at is giving the soil a rest, because a lot of our giant vegetables are grown in traditional soils as well as hydroponics. So the start for us in the early autumn, say September, October time, is to clear the ground and then sow green manures. So what we will do is we'll use nitrogen fixers such as field beans and vetch. And I was speaking with a guy, Mehdi, in France. We have a problem in our soil called verticillium, which is kind of like it's a soil-borne disease. So you'll grow cucumbers and they'll wilt. What he said is you can look at solar as a form of cleansing the soil, so covering it with black plastic, or you can look at brown mustards, for example. So brown mustard is a biofumigant, which is an organic fumigation of the soil. And unfortunately, you need to do that for 7 years to clear it of verticillium.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So it's quite a long time. But in terms of green manures, they help to break up clay soils. And as I said, they also add organic nitrogen into the soil. So if you've got heavy soils, the green manures are perfect. And what we do then is in March time, so they'll be growing from October to March, the green manures will be trimmed down before they seed, because if you allow them to seed, you potentially can have those seeds in the ground for 7 years. So
right.
We then incorporate that into the soil, allow the green manures to break down. And then what we do then prior to the start of the season is we'll have a soil analysis, which will check the pH and the micro and macronutrients. And then the soil then is prepared, ready for the season ahead. And that's pretty much the general thing that we do in the UK in terms of getting our soil ready, because the soil is really just like the engine for the growth of the plant. Without good soils, then you're not going to have a very good start for your plant. And if you don't have the correct pH of the soil, that could be detrimental to your growing.
Right.
And in our world, you need the perfect environment to grow the biggest or longest vegetable in the world.
Right. That's what I was going to say is for you, I think a lot of people would hear a soil test every year and say, oh, that's overkill. But for you, you have to know exactly the pH and exactly the nutrient quality of the soil. So when you're getting that test back, how often are you having to make slight adjustments to the soil based on the results of that test?
Generally, it's more topical applications. So our soil lacks molybdenum, which is kind of like a nitrogen, and boron, which we lack. So if you don't have sufficient boron, plants can suffer with rotting. And also, you can also put too much boron on, so you'll have boron lockup. So it's quite a fine balance, to be honest. And I remember we also have leaf analysis throughout the year, and the leaf analysis checks for the deficiencies in the plants. So if you see a deficiency in the leaf analysis would have told you that 3 weeks prior, but your eye will only see that 3 weeks once it's in the plant. And
oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying when you say leaf analysis is not an eye scan of it, like a personal eye scan. You are taking a leaf cutting and sending that out to a laboratory?
Yeah. So we'll send that to a lab. There's plenty of them in the UK, and then they will just analyze the leaf and then tell you what's wrong. But what I used in terms of the leaf analysis we had done 2 years ago, we had the leaf analysis, sent it off, and they said you need a bit of potash. So me being me, I put a bit too much down.
Yep.
2 days later, the zucchinis or marrows, they exploded.
Oh my gosh. No.
Yeah. So,
Well, I didn't even know
they're,
that was a service that was offered. It was a leaf and is that an expensive thing? Is it similar price as a soil test?
yeah, I think it was about £15, 15, £20.
Oh, wow.
And if you want to grow the biggest or the best or the healthiest vegetables, you need to have, the right ingredients or the right structures to the soils, and also the plants to give the plants a head start, really. And it's just like feeding children. If you don't
Yeah.
feed your children, they're going to be malnourished, and it's exactly the same with vegetables.
Yeah. Yeah. Except for we can't take a finger analysis of our children and cut it off and send it out to a lab.
There wouldn't be many left.
Yeah, there wouldn't be many left. So yeah, I was curious, when you say leaf analysis, are you doing that a certain number of times through? Is there a schedule for that, or how are you checking on that throughout the season?
Yeah, we typically do it 3 times in a season.
It's like early vegetative growth,
Yes,
middle, and then closer towards the fruiting phase.
Closer towards the fruiting, yeah. So there's 3 key stages.
The sponsor of today's show is Gorilla Cart. Built smart, always tough. And I have to say that tagline makes a lot of sense because I've been using and abusing my Gorilla dump cart and Gorilla wheelbarrow for a few years now, and they never skip a beat. The 7 cubic foot Gorilla dump cart can hold up to 1,200 pounds, and with 4 wheels, it's actually easy to pull and maneuver around the garden. The quick release dump handle makes it easy to dump compost, soil, mulch, or whatever it is you have to haul around your garden. The best part is that it's actually very easy to dump whatever load you have because the wheel in the back actually rolls as you dump, making it easy no matter how strong you are. I also love the 4 cubic foot dump cart because the narrower wheelbase means that I could fit it down my tight garden pathways. But what if you have a garden that's overgrown and crowded like mine can sometimes get? Well, no worries, because the wheelbarrow can pivot into just about the tightest corner of any space. And my favorite part, beyond the fact that it is definitely the most sturdy wheelbarrow I've ever used, is that it doesn't have that annoying metal plate in the front that always gets loose, jams up your tire, and stops your wheelbarrow from working, because they designed it in a way where that is not possible. Because Gorilla Cart is built smart and always tough. Available at major retailers. Check out their products at gorillamade.com or use the link in the description.
Here's a couple of freestyle questions I have for you, just for my own curiosity. Is how often are you growing a giant veg in a container or a hydroponic environment rather than in ground?
2 years ago, we took part in a TV program, and it was basically looking at hydroponics v soil. And for us, it was the start of us getting into hydroponics, and we haven't looked back, to be honest, in terms of hydro growing, because we can't grow cucumbers in the soil, so we had to look at alternatives, because the cucumbers were just wilting when they started to fruit. So for us, all of our cucumbers and tomatoes are grown in hydroponically, as well as the chilies and peppers. And for me, it's been a real steep learning curve, because I thought, oh my God, what am I going to be doing with this water? How am I going to ensure that there's the right feed structure? And we can talk about this in another podcast about how we grow peppers hydroponically and cucumbers hydroponically. But there is a fine art. It's not rocket science. It's more about learning as you go along. And that's the good thing about gardening, really, because you learn by your mistakes, and in life, if you make a mistake, you go back and correct it, or you try and find a way to overcome that issue. And it's the same with gardening, really. You're going to have failures, you're going to have successes, but each time you learn from them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I actually started out in hydroponics, and my learning curve was quite steep as well, but that's the first thing I learned when it came to gardening. And so I sort of have a near and dear part of my gardening world that is still tied to hydroponics. But yeah, I mean, I mess up things pretty much every single year on a consistent basis. So I'm always taking notes on things. Like I tried to grow peanuts last year and it did not go well. I got like 6 peanuts, which were the best tasting peanuts I ever had, but didn't go that well. So yeah, I mean, always mistakes are always teaching us. And I saw this picture of Kevin's son, Jamie, standing next to a giant cabbage that they grew, and he looks absolutely tiny next to this thing. I mean, it is so big, and I'm curious, Kevin, how much it weighed, but maybe we could start out by just talking about how do you even begin growing a giant cabbage? Where do you start? How do you sow the seeds? Like maybe we could just talk about it, the whole life cycle of the plant.
Yeah, sure. So it was quite phenomenal cabbage that at the start sowing the seeds, they're just an ordinary cabbage seed that you get from a packet, so you wouldn't really know any difference. But the genetic potential of that seed is there to grow huge. The seeds typically would have been sown in November many years ago, but I'm not sure if it's climate change, but we've seen that the cabbages have been coming way too early for some of our September shows. So what we've done over the last 2 to 3 years is we've been starting them off in January. And on our Instagram page, you can see now some of the cabbages that have been transplanted are pretty much the same size now as they would have been started in November. So for us, they're grown in trays, and then we will then prick them out and put them into 3-inch pots. They're then grown in those 3-inch pots for probably about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they're transplanted. Then what we do now is we use air pots, or there's a new pot called Air Wrap. And I really like this Air Wrap pot. It was launched back last year, and it has a cone in the bottom which encourages capillary action. So one of the issues with air pots is they do dry out very quickly, but this one has been absolutely phenomenal, and it does retain the water. And with capillary action, the roots of the plant are being drawn to the moisture. So we can feed with seaweed, so we use traditional seaweeds, or we have our own compost tea. And then that will then get the plant growing. The plant will be planted out in roughly about May time. So it's grown from January to May in a greenhouse. It'll be hardened off about 3 weeks prior to going out into the ground. One of the things that you have to be really careful of is, well, in the UK, for example, we have bitterly northerly winds. So when they're planted out into the ground, they'll go into an actual frame, and that frame will be wrapped in shrink wrap, which will then basically prevent cold air going into the root. And they're not grown inside, they're grown outside. So the cabbages will then be planted in, like I said, May. From May to September, they'll grow up to probably 80 to 90, 100 pounds in weight. So it's a hell of a lot of cabbage. One of the problems is trying to keep pests at bay. So we use something which is called EnviroMesh to keep butterflies out, because we have, I don't know if you have them in the US, but we have something called a cabbage white butterfly. And yeah. They're the white butterflies with black spots, and they're pretty lethal, because in probably about 2-3 days, I know these are giant leaves, but they'll munch through a giant leaf, and you'll be having giant caterpillars.
So that's probably my number one pest. It's going to destroy any brassica I have, to the point where I've considered not growing them. And then I've also just pretty much given up and said, I have to put them under row covers. There's nothing else I can really do, because they just decimate leaves like crazy. So the EnviroMesh, is that effectively like a floating row cover type of thing, or is that just something you wrap around the giant cabbage?
No, we actually have we put scaffolding poles, and then we wrap in like a frame. So it's kind of like a mini greenhouse structure. So it's a fine mesh which prevents the pests from coming in. And I don't know if you suffer with something called cabbage root fly, or maybe you call it something different in the US, which attacks the roots. But we'll use like a bit of card, which goes around the roots, which then prevents the cabbage root fly from entering the roots.
Oh, wow. So how do you get that down? How do you adjust that as the size of the root ball or the root grows over time?
With difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we've used plastic, but I don't really like using plastic because it sweats. Some people use carpet, but you have to make sure that you keep cutting it away. We don't really suffer that much with cabbage root fly, really, to be perfectly truthful, but there's always the chance that the cabbage root fly will lay their eggs and literally destroy the cabbage within a couple of weeks, and you're left with a couple of cabbage leaves.
Yeah, and that's, especially when you're growing something for the purposes of maxing out its genetic potential, it's got to be heartbreaking to lose it to something like that.
Yeah, in terms of feeding as well, we use organic chicken pellets, which are really high in nitrogen, which nitrogen will encourage leaf growth. Something we've also used, we launched, I don't know if you have Costa Coffee in the US, but we launched a national grounds to grounds program, which is recycling coffee grounds. And we sprinkle the coffee grounds around the outside of the cabbage to prevent slugs.
Oh, right. The graininess.
Yeah, from becoming, giant slugs. 'Cause once they munch, they grow quite quick.
Yeah. We don't have Costa Coffee here, I don't think, but Starbucks has that program. And then I actually just run down to my local coffee shop and I just say, hey, I give them a 5-gallon bucket. I just say, hey, for a couple of days, why don't you dump some coffee in here and I'll find a way to use the grounds.
Yeah, the problem is I don't even like coffee. So.
Yeah. For you, it's a different story. Okay, so I guess are there any unique challenges to growing a giant cabbage? Like maybe does it start to collapse on its own weight? Do you have to support it in any way? Or how do you make sure that it continues to grow without sort of developing in a weird way? There's things I guess I don't really know about growing it to this level of size.
Yeah, I think it's more about the time when you start it. So it's grown from January to September, 9 months. Mm-hmm. Typically a cabbage will grow for 3 to 4 months.
Right.
Generally. Also, we need to make sure that some people use a tire in terms of support. So they'll put the cabbage inside a tire, and then the tire then will support the leaves. But what we've done is we've got a metal square, and that gets put into the ground, and the cabbage leaves literally rest over that. One of the problems we did have is we had it too high. So when it was raining, the water was storing in the leaves. And then we had to literally just poke the leaves with a stick to get the water out. But what we've learned is we've lowered that. So the leaves literally hang over. So the water doesn't collect. Because if you have water and then you get the sun, then you get pretty smelly cabbage at the end of it. So. Right.
It starts to sort of rot while it's living, right?
Yeah. So these are all like kind of things that we've learned. And as I said previously, gardening is about learning as you go along. And for me, it's about imparting my knowledge and what we've learned to help others. In terms of spraying, then we will use a horticultural soap, which is an organic soap that gets rid of potential green fly. It's an asphyxiator, so it'll get rid of green fly. So they're kind of pests. You could potentially have white fly. I'm not sure if these are called the same in the US, but we'll also spray with silica, which strengthens the cell walls of the plant, and also seaweed. So the seaweed will provide essential nutrients, and it's just like a kind of a tonic for the plant.
Right. And you're doing that as a foliar spray on the leaves, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
Spraying pretty much at nighttime. Not in the day because it'll burn the leaves and you'll just end up with the green turning brown. So, but in terms of some of the cabbages, they're absolutely beautiful. The actual shape, and hopefully, some seeds can arrive on your doorstep soon when you can grow some giant cabbages.
Yeah, I'm definitely really excited. I'm hoping they make it through.
Yes. So in terms of the diameter of the cabbages, they can go in excess of 6 feet in diameter.
Oh my gosh.
So they're pretty hard to lift, really. And I've got an amazing video of Jamie with this telescopic saw trying to cut the stalk of the cabbage off. And
how thick does the actual stalk get? I was curious about that.
Yeah, in terms of circumference, probably about 14 inches.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it takes some cutting. And
so then, the cabbage, specifically the cabbage that was on my Instagram post, your Instagram post that Jamie's standing next to, is that like 100, 110 pounds? How heavy does that end up being?
That was weighing about 85 pounds. That was taken to a show in an amazing garden in West Wales called Aberglasney Gardens. And I got an interesting story about this one. If you want to hear this one out,
let's hear it.
Yeah. So they had a giant vegetable show there, went on for a couple of years. And then I got chatting with this lady and gent there, and they said to me, "What are you doing with that cabbage?" I said, "You can have it if you like." I said, "Well, we're taking it to our comprehensive school. We're going to showcase it in the school." And then I said, "Well, how are you getting it there?" So we've got an Audi TT. So they came down with this Audi TT, opened the back of the boot or the trunk, and we lifted it in. Tried to close the boot or the trunk, and the stalk was sticking up. So we had to cut it in half, unfortunately. But
oh no,
as in the stalk,
right, not the whole thing.
Yeah, so it ended up going to a comprehensive school. It went into a science lesson, a maths lesson, a cookery lesson, and then it ended up feeding 1,000 school kids. So everybody benefited from it.
That's incredible. Yeah. So we did have a question coming in and saying, how's the flavor of a giant vegetable when it's grown to that size? Is the flavor degrade at all, or is it still good? Just basically, what does it taste like? A lot of people were wondering.
Yeah, they've got, for me, I've had some really good feedback on growing giant vegetables and people who are growing on allotments. They say that like the cabbages taste really good and they've got loads of pungent flavors in them, because for me, it's probably because they're grown longer and they have a longer season. And the heart of a cabbage, that would last you weeks, and it is so fresh. You can actually literally split it with your fingers. It's that delicate, the actual cabbage, and it's not tough at all. It's beautiful. It doesn't take long to cook at all.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people were curious about. So Kevin has a former Guinness Book of World Records for the largest chili pepper. And we're going to talk about how he did it. It's a little bit different than what you heard yesterday as far as giant cabbages go, because he did it in a hydroponic system. So, Kevin, could you kind of walk us through, well, first of all, how big and what type of pepper was that? And then could you walk us through how you got it to that size?
Yeah, so the pepper that we grew was a poblano pepper. The previous record was held by, it's quite apt, Ed Curry, who's a guy over in the US. And our pepper weighed 348 grams. I don't know what that is in pounds, but maybe we can have a look at Google.
Right.
In terms of growing, as I said in previous podcasts, we've developed our growing hydroponically as well as soil. So this pepper was actually grown in a hydroponic system called a GoGrow system. And that is a gravity-fed irrigation system. And for us, it was really, really interesting, because that was our second year in growing. The previous year, we grew the UK's biggest bell pepper, and that was grown hydroponically. And we took part in a program called Countryfile, which is on BBC. And that was really just about showcasing hydroponic growing. And for me, I think hydroponic growing is quite a relatively easy way to grow for a novice and someone who's started out. If you don't have sufficient space in your backyard or your back garden, you can have a pot with a reservoir next to it and, grow your own tomatoes or whatever you want to do. But for us, in terms of growing the pepper, we started the seed off in early February. It was started off in Koya. I don't know how you pronounce it in America. Coir. Is it coir?
I call it coconut coir, but I'm not really sure exactly how to say that last word, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's basically recycled. It's quite sustainable. It has no nutrients. So you have to add your own nutrients to the plant, to the reservoir. So for us growing the GoGrow, we had a gravity-fed system, which was linked then to a 90-litre reservoir. And that reservoir there, for us, it was a science. So you need some good tools. So you need an EC meter and a pH pen. So controlling the pH of the water, typically around about 6 for the pH of the water. And then the EC is basically for a layman, it's really the nutrient strength of the water.
Right.
Sorry. So as the plant is growing, you increase the nutrients and you increase the NPK of that in accordance with grow and bloom, and then fruit. So you have the 3 cycles really. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to produce, and you're probably more of an expert in hydroponic growing than me. But we've only been doing it for 3 to 4 years, but it's pretty much the same as growing in soil, but you're creating more of, for me, the perfect environment for that plant to grow.
Right.
And you're giving the plant all of the nutrients that it needs to flourish, really.
Yeah, I mean, the difference for me is just you have the opportunity and the potential risk of having to be perfect, right? Because the water is your soil and you have to put in all of the nutrients. So if you don't do it right, then of course the plant's going to have deficiencies all over the place. Or if you don't monitor your pH, it'll swing like crazy. But on the other end of it, if you're trying to grow a giant vegetable, well, then you have the opportunity of putting in exactly what that plant needs throughout the entire life cycle. And then, of course, look at the result for you. You had a world record poblano. And by the way, that ended up being about 12 ounces or 3/4 of a pound. In
3/4 of a pound, okay. Yeah.
In our imperial measuring system. So,
Jamie made a giant chili out of it. So.
Oh, wow. Amazing. And how did he find that the flavor of that was also pretty good?
It's very mild, but
yeah.
I kept the seeds.
Yeah, of course. You got to keep those seeds. So were you growing this under lights? Were you growing it indoors or outdoors?
We can't really grow peppers outside in the UK because of the climate. Last year we had, record-breaking temperatures, but we've got it's something called a Keda greenhouse, and it's a double bubble wrap insulated greenhouse. And that is our engine really for growing our vegetables. In terms of growing inside, I think for us it's probably more beneficial because we can control that environment.
Yep.
So we can have CO2 which we can mix into the environment as well, and also we can bring in predators if we have any bugs. Like sometimes you have thrips. I don't know if you struggle with thrips in the US.
Chronic pest.
Yeah.
And spider mites and all sorts of stuff indoors.
Yeah. So foliar feeding is key as well. So we'll foliar feed with CalMag and also seaweed stuff. We'll also foliar feed with silica to strengthen the cell walls of plants. And also it's really about trying to develop the right feed in the system. In terms of your question about lights, we started off with T5 lights to bring the plants on, which are kind of like natural daylight, because we're not really blessed in Wales with that much sunshine, and today it's been overcast all day. So
right.
In terms of moving then from a propagator then into the hydroponic system, I did, when the plants were growing that well, they were probably up about 4 to 5 feet tall. I turned on, we've got this light called a Gavita light, and it gives off quite a lot of heat.
That's
and
a plasma grow light, right?
Yeah, I stupidly turned it on, and it burnt it burnt the leaves because it was too close to it.
Yeah, plasma are quite powerful, but also they put out quite a bit of heat, so you have to bump the placement up quite a bit.
Yeah, but there wasn't enough space, so it was only on for about half an hour, and the leaves started to crinkle. So.
Oh wow!
But it survived.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to hear. Well, okay, so I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned offhand that I think a lot of listeners might not be familiar with. So you mentioned supplementing your pepper plant indoors with carbon dioxide, right? And I think that's something that I've heard about in research from commercial cannabis cultivators because they have a big incentive to maximize the yield of their crops, of course. So could you explain in just a little quick bit why you might supplement your pepper plant with CO2?
Yeah, I think in terms of supplementing your plant with CO2, it increases the photosynthesis of the plants, which then increases the growth and then allows the plants to breathe. And I think for us, we do also spray with CO2. They're called Lithivit, and you can immediately see, the plants growing. And I'd like one day to use the CO2 at a certain time and then put that onto a time lapse camera so you could see the plants growing.
Yeah, that would be amazing. You know, what would be cool someday is if you were to do a time lapse over the course of an entire life cycle of one of your giant vegetables. I don't know how exactly you would do that, but that'd be really cool to see. Like, can you imagine a 9-month time lapse of a giant cabbage or something like that?
Yes. Plants also, they grow better at nighttime.
Yep. Exactly.
And there was one guy, one of the giant vegetable growers actually did a time lapse for cabbage, but it was only over like a week. And you could literally see the cabbage leaves waving up into the sky.
Yeah.
Literally growing like 2 feet overnight. It was absolutely incredible.
That's insane. You're gonna have to send me the link. I'll share it with everyone once we have it, because that's something I'd like to see. Are there any other final tips for growing a giant chili pepper that you want everyone to know, or is that pretty much a good summary of it?
I think also something that we did look at is pruning the plant. So once the fruit is set, stop the plant from growing. So then all of the energy then is going into the fruit. And we only grew one chili on the actual plant.
Oh, that makes sense.
So we didn't have a whole host of chilies on there. So all of the energy was going into that fruit production. And the chili will give off an ethylene gas, which will then make it ripen. So the chili will give off an ethylene gas, which will make it go ripe when they're starting to turn red. But what we did is we put a fan onto it, which was slowing down the ripening process. And that seemed to work.
Wow. So you blew the ethylene gas away from the proximity of the pepper, and then that tricked it into not ripening and thus getting bigger. Yeah,
because once they start to turn red, they pretty much, they'll go within a couple of days. But
right. And
it lasted about 10, 12 days, which was much better than normal. So that's a tip that we use.
I never would have thought of that. Okay, guys. So two final tips before we close today's show are to, if you're trying to do this, prune off any other fruit and have one plant dedicated to producing one fruit, and then also maybe an oscillating fan or something like that to blow off the ethylene gas as it starts to put it out and starts to go through the ripening process. That's a really cool tip. I never would have thought of that. Now we're going to the root crop world, and how do you grow giant carrots? So I became weirdly obsessed with watching all these YouTube videos about how UK growers are doing giant root crops. And so one way I've seen it done is building like a very, very long and tall, like 1 square foot frame that you fill with sand and like poke a hole down in and then just put compost straight down in the hole. I'm curious if that's the way that you guys do it, Kevin. And basically, could you just kind of talk us through how to grow absolutely massive carrots?
Yeah, we've got plenty of time, so hopefully you'll learn some of our tips as well.
Yep.
So in terms of carrots, we've grown a carrot which has weighed 18.5 pounds. That's our biggest to date. But
wow.
The world's largest carrot is held by a guy in the US called Christopher Quayle, and that was 22 pounds. I don't know if you've probably seen that all over the US press. It was an incredible feat.
Yeah.
For us, in terms of growing carrots, we start the carrots off as seeds. And I'll talk to you about how we develop those seeds in another podcast. But in terms of the carrots, they started off initially through chitting. So they'll go into like a plastic container with moist kitchen towel. They'll go into like an airing cupboard, and then they'll be germinating within 2 to 3 days. Then they're then transferred then into an air pot or air wrap or whatever pot you want. And something we've learned is in terms of going from the chitting to the initial transplant is trying to get the pot quite deep, because what you're trying to do is the taproot, which is the long root of the carrot, you want that to be as long as possible, because the longer that is, the bigger the carrot is going to be. So if that gets snapped in any way, you're going to have a dumpy carrot.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do then, this year we tried something which was totally different, growing them in the air pots. And for me, it was a challenge really, because you needed 4 pairs of hands trying to get these out when the pot was unwrapped. So when we get them out, we grow them in coir, because it's got no nutrient in. And the theory for me is that the roots will go deeper and searching for food. And then I think that's actually worked, because the theory has turned into practice this year, because we had carrots which were probably about 12 inches long.
Wow.
They're then transplanted then into big flower pots, which are roughly about 16 inches deep by about 8 to 10 inches in circumference, in diameter. And they're then transplanted from the air pot into those. And there's a specific mixture in that we use. And we'll incorporate compost, coir, horticultural sand, which is quite a gritty sand. And then we'll put our own unique feed into that. We'll dust the roots with mycorrhiza. We've got our own myco giant veg that will be dusted around the roots on transplant. And then that will then go into that pot, and then it will grow in that pot. Then we will use potentially some T5 lighting. It depends on the weather, really, just to try and get the carrots to grow. But what we did find is that by using artificial lighting, it did kind of force some of them to go to seed and further on down the season. They'll be grown in those tubs from probably from February to April, and then they're then transplanted. Then you'll use yours in a container, but what we've got a coal frame, which is basically a mini glass house, which is raised up off the ground. So it's probably raised up about 2 feet. And then we'll dig down a square hole, which will probably be about 18 inches by 18 inches. And then the depth of that will probably be about 24 inches, which is about 2 feet. The pot then, the flower pot will be transferred from the greenhouse into the growing space. And then what we've done is we've cut the pot in half, and then we tie it around with tape. So that pot is then put into the final transplant, and then we take away the tape and literally lift out the sides of the pot, so you have minimal root disturbance. And then around that pot, then our specific mixture is incorporated. And that's the start of the carrots. Then we'll also, when they're in, we'll put some bamboo canes in a wrap with shrink wrap, just the same principle as the cabbages, to keep them a little bit warmer. And then we try not to overwater. And one of the things that you have to look out for with carrots is literally having a deluge of water, because they can split very, very easily. And, literally within a day they'll split. And when you're growing for giants, you need to make sure that you have a consistent watering program. And for us growing inside, the benefit of that is that we can control the watering. So this year we used a 500 litre reservoir, and one of my friends, Graham, came down and gave me a hand with this. And you have to obviously elevate it a little bit to get the gravity to pull it through. And we use something called T-tape. And I filled up this 500 litre. We put it on a couple of breeze blocks and a pallet. And the water was nearing the top. And literally, I saw this before my eyes. The 500 litres of water was literally coming on top of me, and it put me flat on my backside. So I learned to make sure it's balanced properly in the future.
Yeah, no kidding.
I had a bit of whiplash from that as well, but yeah. So in terms of what we did last year, we had a battery operated water timer, and that allowed for us to control the watering and feeding program for the carrots. And that worked really well last year. I think one of the problems we had last year is it was very hot. So the carrots would have probably grown really well outside because we didn't have that much rainfall. So one of the problems with the UK is that you can't really guarantee you're going to have a good, long, dry summer.
Right.
Because we have quite torrential downpours. And I remember when I visited San Diego when I was a kid, it was incredible weather over there in the summer. And you're blessed with sunshine, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have an incredible summer. I mean, I always kind of say we have two seasons. We have a spring and a summer. And it just depends on which part of maybe when you get to like November, December, it basically just kind of becomes springish again. Or I guess we kind of have like a summer and a fall. We just don't have a winter. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but one thing I was going to say was, what problems would you run into with a giant carrot? Because like you were saying, the overwatering will cause cracking because it will just swell up and break its own outer skin, right? But as far as pests or diseases like the cabbage, is there anything that you really have to watch out for?
Well, for us, green fly. So you can have green fly under the leaves, and because the leaves are green, it's quite difficult to see it sometimes. So what we'll use is the horticultural soap, which we'll spray onto the carrots, and we'll have a program of spraying that as more of a preventative. In terms of you can potentially have thrip on carrots or red spider, but I find that if the plant is growing really healthily and the plant has got sufficient nutrient uptake, then they're less susceptible then to being attacked by pests. In my view, and one of the carrots we had last year, which was really attacked by pests, was that was a really weak carrot, and it didn't actually impact on the other carrots. So something we also use is, I don't know if you get this in the US, is wool compost, so sheep's wool compost.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so we use that as a mulch. That has got nitrogen, so it's basically a slow release nitrogen. So that encourages growth of the carrot as well. And it's just like little things like that we use to keep it moist so it doesn't dry out, because irregular watering, as I said earlier, will cause the carrot to split.
Yeah.
And if with a giant carrot, if it's coming out of the ground, it doesn't matter for us really. Well, we did a program with CBS back last May, and we dug up a giant carrot that went out, I think, to about 146 news channels in America, and they were talking about the history of my dad, and it was really great actually. Terry Okita came; she was one of the correspondents for CBS, and she come and helped us lift a giant carrot, and I think it was about 14.5 pounds in weight, and that was lifted in April time. So I kept it growing over the winter, and fortunately for us, we've managed to save some seed from that. So that's one of the seeds that we're growing this year.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, so you continue the life cycle of that giant plant.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, those are some tips. I'm definitely going to try this out. I think the thing that I had mentioned at the front end of the episode was more a technique for growing long carrots then. Rather than just a straight up giant carrot or a very large, heavy, wide carrot.
Yes.
But it seems like similar principles are in play. You're just trying to manipulate the unique way that a carrot grows because we're growing it for the root and not anything on top.
Yeah, it's more really about with your technique, you can probably grow in sand and then you core out a cylinder really,
mm-hmm.
and then you'll fill that with a compost mixture. And then the carrot will grow generally the size of the hole. Whereas with us, we need a giant hole.
Right.
Whereas you're growing to eat for a kitchen garden, perhaps.
Right. Exactly.
And whereas we're growing to get a big carrot on the scales. So
yeah. To break the world record.
I suppose your carrots are good to eat, but ours are good for dental flossing. But
yeah, no. I was reading the Christopher Quayley's Guinness Book of World Records entry, and apparently he didn't eat that carrot at all, and his mom took a bite of it, and so she has the claim to fame of having the only person to ever take a bite of the world's heaviest carrot, but it was not very tasty.
Well, it probably had a nice bit of flavor, but it was pretty quite tough.
Yeah, exactly. And in just looking at it, and I'll include a link in the podcast description, everyone, it is one carrot, but they throw out these secondary roots that are effectively the size that anyone in your home garden would be happy to have a normal carrot. This guy's carrot has secondary roots of maybe like 25 that look like 25 carrots attached to a giant carrot, which is just it's a freak of nature. So definitely I'll put that in the podcast description. Some awesome tips on growing giant carrots. How do you grow a giant cucumber from seed? There's going to be some similarities in this episode to the world record chili pepper, but with a couple different techniques, because of course a cucumber is a much different plant and grows in a different manner than a pepper. So Kevin, how do we approach growing a giant cucumber?
With difficulty. No, in terms of giant cucumbers, my dad started off some of the very early strains of the giant cucumber variety. And myself and my brother have developed that over time. Some of the world's largest cucumbers are the world's heaviest cucumber weighs 27 pounds, and Ian Neal holds the world's longest cucumber, which is just over 43 inches long. And the seed from the world's longest cucumber was developed by my dad back in the early 80s, and we've just developed those genetic lines going forward. In terms of us, unfortunately, we've developed verticillium, which is what I spoke about in a previous podcast. And for us, we had to look at hydroponic growing because it was the only way for us to be able to grow cucumbers and to keep that seed line going. Because we were growing in soils, the cucumber would basically grow, you'd set the fruit, and the cucumber would literally wilt. And we didn't really know what it was, and we engaged with a lead university in the UK and took some analysis of the plant, and they said it was the dreaded verticillium, which is affecting growing institutions and growing environments throughout the world. And whoever develops a cure for verticillium will be a very rich lady or man. Mm-hmm. For us, in terms of cucumbers, growing in hydroponics, they'll grow 250% faster than growing in soil. And we start off our cucumbers in May. They started off in coir. They'll then be put into a propagator. So all of our seeds are chitted, generally in an airing cupboard. So then we're ensuring that we have very good propagation and we're not wasting space. They'll then be transferred then into the propagator. And then they'll be held in the greenhouse then probably for 4 or 5 weeks, and then taken then into the other tunnel where we have our hydroponic system set up. Mm-hmm. The cucumber then will then be supported on a very strong wire, because the cucumbers, when they're weighing 23 to 26 pounds, they need to be supported, because if they fall off, then it's game over.
Yeah, you're done.
So, yeah, they grow that fast, and they're that vigorous that they'll grow probably 6 to 8 inches a day.
Are you serious?
In terms of the actual plant.
Oh my God.
So you have to make sure that you twist them around the rope.
6 to 8 inches
and tie
a
them
day.
up. That's the actual plant. Yeah,
the vegetation, right? That's like a seaweed like level of growth. I think seaweed can grow 2 to 3 feet a day, to the point where you can actually watch it actually grow.
Yeah, so you'll go off for the day and you'll come back and the cucumber be flapping around. So
wow,
making sure you keep an eye on that is key, really, because even if it snaps, your main leader, you can use a side shoot, and the side shoots can then grow a big cucumber, and you can carry on going. But all our plants are grown on a main vine, so you won't have side shoots growing. So they'll just have one main lead of plants.
And you're clipping off the side shoots then, right?
Yeah, sure. Because you want all the energy to go into the main plant and the fruit production. Mm-hmm. So we hand pollinate all of our cucumbers as well, just to ensure that we have the right genetics going forward, because a cucumber will cross pollinate, and you don't want like a seed line that's been developed for 20, 30 years to be ruined overnight, really. So they'll take about 6 to 8 weeks to grow to their full potential. And what we do is we'll I don't know if you have horticultural fleece, so we'll bind that together, and then that will then be used to support the fruit. Some people use their wives' tights or stockings, but I don't really trust those. So I then support the cucumber, and then around the base of the cucumber we'll support that as well, because we don't want it to drop. And like I said, 26-pound cucumber is quite a lot to support. It's the same technique also for growing long cucumbers. So last year we grew a cucumber which was just over 36 inches, and that got the attention of a New Zealand gardener, actually, Linda Hallinan, and she wanted to come over to see the size of our cucumbers, and I didn't complain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a visit from Linda, and she came in, saw a hydroponic setup, and she did an article for us over in New Zealand, and it was quite interesting, really, just imparting our knowledge on how we grow them. And in terms of the hydroponics, starting off pretty much the same, really, for the initial phases, right the way through to flower and fruit. So it's about controlling the feed and the EC. So you start off with like 1.2 EC, rise into, I think the cucumbers went up to about 2.2, 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
So quite high strength feed. And for us, it's just trying to perfect that, because we can't grow in soil. So the water is our soil, and trying to make sure that the right nutrient is in that to grow the cucumbers. Foliar feeding is key as well. So we'll foliar feed with seaweed, which is key for us, really. And also, once the cucumber has been set, we'll stop the plant growing. So then all the energy then is going into the fruit production.
Yeah, makes sense. And are you doing the same thing that you did with your hydroponic peppers, where you're clipping any fruit off except for one? Or you're only growing one cucumber per vine, or are you growing more than one?
In terms of growing cucumbers, we only grow one cucumber per plant. For me, we need to try and put all the energy into growing that cucumber, because the genetic potential is in that cucumber to grow giant. And by growing more than one, the feed is going in to produce two plants, two fruits. So I think for us, trying to put all the energy into one plant is more beneficial. Also, what we need to do also is try to stagger the pollination, so you're not having all the cucumbers come at once.
Oh, right.
So, and with the long ones, they sometimes they'll snap. I've heard of growers put pipes on the cucumbers to try and make them go longer, but they grow that fast that they'll quickly expand into the pipe.
Oh, wow.
And you won't be able to get
put a pipe around the cucumber.
Yeah, to try and stretch it to the light.
Right.
That was the theory.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it hasn't worked.
Yeah,
for us.
I was going to say, what do you think about that theory? Because as far as I understand, I'm not sure if a fruit will bend towards the light, will it? Or vegetation certainly will, but I'm not sure if a fruit does.
Yeah, maybe it's perhaps just trying to straighten the fruit out. So the straighter it is, the longer it's going to be.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
But the 36-inch long cucumber, it weighed about 22 pounds in weight. So it was. I've got a photograph that I can share with you.
Yeah. I'll definitely put that in the podcast. I'll probably put it up on Instagram too. I think it'd be really cool to see examples of some of the things that we've been talking about. Are there any other tips or little techniques? I know you said with peppers, blowing a fan as the ethylene gas starts to come out help.
I think I've said one of the tips really is support.
Yep.
Another one is checking for thrips,
mm-hmm.
because if you have a thrip population in there, then when you see the thrips, they've already laid their eggs. So you need to try and control that life cycle of the thrips, and the thrips will destroy the leaves, literally within a matter of a week. So it's kind of like trying to do that as organically as possible, by using our horticultural soaps, for example, to try and control the thrips. Another tip really is just with the hydroponics, it's never going to dry out, but if you are growing in soil, to try and regulate the watering, because irregular watering is going to be detrimental to the fruit. And that's one of the benefits of growing hydroponically, is that the plant is always nourished.
Right. Yeah, you can just craft that perfect environment for them.
Yeah, so that's something that we've learned really, and I think time as well. So sometimes we're out in the greenhouses until 1 a.m. in the morning, just trying to get side shoots off, and it is kind of like an obsession really. But
right,
my friend Shane, he came down, put up lighting for us, and that was probably a bad thing actually, because it allows us to get out there in all hours, but sometimes we need to sleep.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's part of it's dedication to the cause, right? You're growing a plant to its absolute maximum. So of course you're going to have to put a lot more effort into that. So guys, it sounds like giant cucumbers may be a fun one to try, because not only can you grow them in a hydroponic environment, but Kevin said they grow 6 to 8 weeks rather than, a 9-month cabbage. So it could be a fun one to experiment with, especially if you've got the space. Now we're going to talk about saving seeds from really any plant, but also how Kevin saves his giant vegetable seeds. But before we get into that, Kevin, I think one thing that we may not have mentioned is, if you're really trying to grow an absolutely massive version of a particular plant, how important it is to start off with the right genetic potential, the right seed. So one question that we definitely got was, can you just grow any plant to a giant veg status, any old seed?
I think what you need to do is start off with the right seed. And for us, you need to have seed with genetic potential, not genetically modified, but they have the genetics within the seed structure to grow giant. And some of these seeds have been developed over 20, 30 years. So without, like a cabbage, for example, you couldn't really grow an ordinary cabbage giant. You need specific seeds to enable them to go giant. And I know on your Instagram page, there was some guys there in Alaska talking about cabbages. And in Alaska, they have daylight, constantly for 24 hours over a couple of months. So they do grow giant cabbages there. And I know Scott Robb in Alaska holds the world's largest cabbage record. I don't know how heavy, I can't remember how heavy it is, over 130 odd pounds, but it's quite impressive. In terms of seed saving, my dad developed some techniques which could potentially be transferable from giant vegetables to ordinary vegetables. So some of the listeners could learn some tips from these. So what my dad taught us is how to save clones from plants. So for a beetroot, for example, a giant beetroot, we would take a clone from the plant. So basically just like a slice of the beetroot from where the leaf was coming up. And then we would put some rooting hormone on that, put that into some coir, put that into a propagator, make sure you have the right humidity. And then within 3 to 4 weeks, you'll see roots forming on that actual beetroot. And then something that for us, it's easier to take those cuttings and develop those new seed lines, because if you have a 40, 50 pound beetroot, generally they're probably not going to last until they reach the seed stage, because they'll probably go rotten.
Right.
So by having smaller clones, you can also cross-pollinate. So you can pollinate different strains and different lines. And that's essentially what my dad did, and he imparted that knowledge onto us. So you're kind of like crossbreed it's like breeding a purebred racehorse. You're doing the same with giant vegetables, and you can do the same with other with kitchen garden vegetables. We've developed now a new giant beetroot, which we've developed over the last few years, and it is really epic. It literally, you put your fingers into it and it stains your fingernails.
Oh, wow.
I know there's quite a big vegan movement now in the UK. I don't know if it's like in the US.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I'd like to have some giant beetroot steaks.
Oh,
I don't know how long they take to cook.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah. So in terms of other vegetables like cabbages, for example, with kitchen garden cabbages, the same with giant cabbages. If you leave the stalk in the ground, it will then produce a seed head. So the second year of growth will produce all of the seeds. And then what you can do then is you can take one of those pieces of growth, you can root that, put that into a pot, and then you can just have, your own selection of seeds. There's difference if there's like an F1 or an F2, for example. But we've developed all our own seeds, and they're not F1 varieties. They're our own unique varieties, which have been developed over many, many years. And through cabbages, for example, they'll produce thousands of seeds. And another one tip, and hopefully I can share a picture with you of a guy called Nick Brake, who grew from one of our onion pips last year. He grew an onion which weighed just over 18 pounds in weight, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So how we did that is we saved the onion from the growing season. That then produced a seed head. We shaved off. So how we did that, we produced seed from an onion, which was from a growing season. It then produced leaf growth. It then produced a stalk, which then produced a flower. We cut all of the flowers off the flower head. And then what that did then is it developed clones, which is basically baby onions from the parent plant. So that was used then by Nick to grow his 18-pound, 4-ounce onion, it was really epic. It was, and I've known of one of, I don't know if you've heard of Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, yeah.
He cut one of the giant onions and made some giant onion rings.
Oh, no way.
They took a lot of munching.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I'm looking at the picture right now, actually, of Nick Brake's onion. He looks like the most proud onion father I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's only been doing onions for like 2 to 3 years, and he's really got the bug. And it's brilliant to see. He's become a real close personal friend. He just lives over in Somerset, and he's got some amazing onions growing this year. And last year he won the UK Championships. And hopefully he can challenge the world record this year. And he's looking for his 20-pound
That'd
onion.
be amazing.
But that would make your eyes water.
No kidding. Okay, cool. Are there any other seed saving tips that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think another one is hand pollination. So when you're looking at saving cucumber seeds, for example, you need to make sure that you hand pollinate. Don't let the bees do it, because a bee will travel up to 4 miles, and that pollen can contaminate the cucumber with other pollen from another cucumber, for example. So what we'll do is we'll tie the male flower and the female flower, and then once the male is obviously pollinated the female, then we'll tie that to seal the actual fruit off, or the stamen off, from actually cross-pollination, really. So we're trying to develop pure strains, and that's one of our top tips, really. Just hand pollinate where possible.
Yeah, makes sense. And you can it's all a matter of precision and control, it seems like, when it comes to growing giant vegetables, whether that's the actual growth process or the seed saving or propagation of new seed lines process, right?
It's also great fun as well. I really thoroughly enjoy being in the garden in the fresh air. You can't beat being outside when the sun is beating down and watching, your vegetables grow and talking to them and kicking them, pulling them up.
Is that a tip that you've kept under the vest? You talk to them and encourage them to grow?
Yeah, I do talk to them, give them a stroke sometimes, and
you're gonna have to try that. It's one thing that I think so. For me, a lot of people I know in the houseplant world they'll talk to their houseplants, or they'll talk to their their vining plants, and outdoors certainly people are talking there. I've never done it. I've never really talked to my plants. I need to try this epic technique out for growth.
Maybe that's the secret to them growing giants.
I feel like I've been missing out on a really pro grower technique that I just need to experiment with. Man, it's been awesome to have you on the podcast this week. I've learned a lot about growing giant vegetables. I'm certainly going to experiment with it this growing season. Hopefully there's still time for me to get at least something sizable out. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about how people can reach you, how they can connect with you? If if they want to get giant seeds or products, how can they get in touch with you for that, et cetera?
Yeah, so we've got our giantveg.co.uk, which is our growing guide website. We've got our giantvegseeds.com website, which has got a lot of our products on and seeds. We've got our Instagram channel, which is @giantveg, Twitter @giantveg, and Pinterest, which we're trying to develop, but there's too many platforms. But hopefully all of the platforms that we're developing will help to encourage more people around the world to start growing giant, and hopefully with your help we can both become epic. Yeah.
Well, I think you're well beyond me as far as giant vegetable epicness. I'm going to try to catch up to you this season and maybe put my foot in the sand. Out of curiosity, before we close out today's show, if I was trying to go for a world record, what would be the easiest one to target? You know, like a gap or something like that, something that I could at least make a foray into.
I'd probably go for the cucumber, because you're blessed in your area with, you know, the perfect weather really and the perfect environment for cucumbers. So if you can try and get a 27 or 28 pound cucumber, then you can get your name in the record books.
Oh man, that would be so amazing. I feel like as the owner of a company called Epic Gardening, I almost need to do it.
Let's do it.
I'm in if you're in. All right, guys, thank you so much for checking out this week with Kevin Fortey of Giant Veg. As he said, he's at Giant Veg most everywhere on the internet. And this whole week in the podcast description, you'll be able to contact him through all the links in the podcast bio. Thank you so much for coming on, Kevin. And everyone else, please let me know if you're going to grow some giant vegetables. I'd like to potentially even have like a contest this year. I think it'd be really fun. So connect with me on Instagram for that, at Epic Gardening. And until next time, good luck in the garden and keep on growing.